Welcome, everybody, to I-80 Sports. Today, we are going to be talking the second round and other notes around the NHL world. Welcome, everybody, again to I-80 Sports. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at I-80 Sports _sports NHL. Make sure you follow us on Facebook on the I-80 Sports discussion group and as well at i80sports.com. Tom, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well. Interesting times right now. Second round's been good. I think it could be a little bit better. A lot of series are one-sided right now. So, I thought, I love the qualifying round. I love the first round. This one's kind of trended downward a little bit, but 3-1 doesn't mean anything as we've seen in recent years.
That is very true. A lot of teams have come back from 3-1, and as you're about to see, based on where we are currently in the playoff climate, we have a lot of 3-1 series right now. So let's recap. So the Tampa Bay Lightning are currently up 3-1 on the Boston Bruins as they are about to take the ice a half hour from now. The New York Islanders are currently up 3-1 on the Philadelphia Flyers. The Vegas Golden Knights are up 3-1 on the Vancouver Canucks. And the Dallas Stars are up 3-1 on the Colorado Avalanche. So what I want to talk about to start this off when we're talking about the second round of the playoffs, I want to talk about maybe some surprises that we've seen so far to start off the second round of the playoffs, and maybe not so surprises, some things that are not currently surprising us. So, Tom, let's start with surprises. What currently surprises you right now as we look at the second round?
You know what? The way the Boston Bruins are playing right now, I thought that this was going to be a tooth and nail 7-game series. And Boston, I mean, even though Boston had a good first game against Tampa, I really thought that, okay, this is going to be back and forth. And it really hasn't been. It really hasn't been. I don't know what Boston is doing. Tampa just seems to be a step ahead of them in every facet of the game. It's not like Tampa's winning on cheap calls. It's not like Boston's getting screwed out of games. They have injuries. It just seems that Tampa has them beat in every part of the ice. And I know we've been back and forth on them. Oh, well, they kind of took it easy preliminary round. Oh, well, Rask left, but they beat Carolina. But now it seems to be like we're back into what's going on with the Bruins, after dominating the league all year. And now all of a sudden now we're going, okay, well, what are they doing now? Now they're 60 minutes away from going home. And I know I'm beating the dead horse here saying this. They are not a young team. And could this be the end for this group in Boston? Could some key players get moved this offseason? We don't know. We'll have to see what happens tonight. Will they live another day? Will they be done? And we have to see what the higher ups over there do if they do indeed lose to Tampa.
And it's true. To piggyback on that, it is very surprising to me to just see Boston go cold like they did before the first round even started, because you and I were saying it was surprising that Boston was able to come back in that first round and really make a series out of it. Now it's just as surprising that all of a sudden they have disappeared. But they are working without a starting goaltender, so maybe it's not so surprising, but you could also say that Yaroslav Halak should be able to pick up the slack. But the problem is, a lot of times right now that has been going wrong for Boston is their defense is just not picking it up in front of them right now. Their defense has left something to be desired, but for another team where their defense is not necessarily left to be desired, the Dallas Stars has been surprising to me. I did not think that the Stars were going to make this an interesting series, but it has been quite the opposite. We have the Dallas Stars who are currently up 3-1 on a team that you and I said we're going to be. We didn't see any way that they weren't going to make it to the Western Conference Final, but they're 16 minutes away from elimination. And to me, the main reason why Colorado has not performed well in this particular series, it all started in game one when Philip Grubauer, their top goaltender, went down. It's been all downhill since. Tom, what do you think about that?
You know what? And like we had discussed in prior episodes, I really did think that, Colorado, everybody knows they are a very good up and coming team, and they're going to be a team to be reckoned with for the next 10 years. But every up and coming team has that one playoff where, okay, this is where they put their mark down. This is where maybe they don't win, but they go on a little run. And I really thought that was going to happen with Colorado this year, and it just isn't. I don't know. Dallas just seems to have them. Just seems to have their number, and maybe Dallas is saying, hey, wait a minute. We still have some guys on here, and I totally forgot that Dallas has 4 battle tested guys. They have Sagan, who won the cup in Boston, was on the team in 2013 in Boston and went to the finals. They have Jamie Benn, who's been there what seems like forever now, but I don't know, it hasn't been that long. And I almost forgot they have Joe Pavelski and Corey Perry, guys who have been through battles. They're a very veteran-heavy team, and all these guys have been there before. They've all been there before, and maybe Colorado, you have guys like McKinnon, you have guys like Makar, great players, but they're basically getting schooled right now. These guys are telling them this is how you win the playoffs, this is how you play. And maybe it'll be an eye-opening lesson for Colorado in the offseason. I'm not saying Colorado's going to get dismantled. Colorado is still going to be a force to be reckoned with in the next 5 to 10 years. You'll see them win multiple cups, if you ask me. But right now, they're basically getting schooled right now. They're getting schooled right now by a bunch of veterans. Almost, I hate to use this reference, but it's almost like we're going to take it back to 1982 now, when the Oilers were, that was their first year. They really dominated with Messier, Gretzky, Anderson, Curry, and all those guys. And they went down in round 1 to the LA Kings in 5 games, including the miracle in Manchester, that notable game 3 where they blew a 5-0 lead and lost 6-5. And LA had the veterans like Charlie Simmer and Dave Taylor. Maybe they weren't as championship caliber veterans as, say, guys like Pavelski. I mean, Pavelski's number 1, but he's been there. Perry, Sagan, Ben. Maybe those guys weren't, as good. The guys at LA weren't as good as these guys. But, it's kind of a similar thing the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah, and I completely agree on that standpoint. First of all, this is no knock on Colorado. I also feel like that's something that we always go back to when we're talking about these particular playoff teams. It's like, well, it's no knock against this team. But in Colorado's case, it really is no knock. And what is really actually kind of scary about this Colorado team is they're still a year away from being at their full potential. We still have not seen their 2 top prospects. We haven't seen Bowen Byram, who they picked number 4 last year, who is a top defensive prospect. We still haven't seen Alex Newhook, who they signed out of college. So this is a team that could either use those prospects to get maybe somebody on the veteran side that has been through these playoffs, that's a grizzled veteran in the playoffs, still young enough to really contribute to either top 6 or forward or top 4D. But this is definitely not the end for Colorado. They've got a long way to go. The one guy I want to highlight on Dallas when we're talking about this Dallas and Colorado series, and just going back a series ago when they faced Calgary, the real difference maker to me for Dallas has actually been in one of their youngest players, Miro Heiskanen, who is one of their top defensemen right now. He's one of their top 4D. He has 3 goals, 13 assists for 16 points in just 13 games. Now, that's impressive enough, but you also take into the account that he's only 21 years old. He is still very much a baby in this league. And fun fact with these 16 points in 13 games, that is a franchise record for the Dallas Stars for postseason points by a defenseman. And he's only 21, and he has been hyped up for years and years now of how good he could be. And it seems like he's been the difference maker for Dallas. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I glossed over him, but yeah, he really has been a difference maker for them as well. I talked about those 4 veteran forwards they have, but yeah, I'm constantly hearing his name every time I have them on. They're using him in all situations, and he really has been the driving force behind that team. But what is working in his favor as well is that he is also not the go-to guy. He's sort of just like, okay, you have all these veterans in the room. It's not up to him to go out there and win them games. You have all these guys who can pick up the slack for him. But I do agree with that. I do agree he has been their MVP. And I do agree he's been a guy that nobody really thought about coming into this. And then all of a sudden, he pops up. But I feel like that's like that with every playoffs. Every playoffs you come in, every team comes in, and every team you have that unsung hero every year, like 10 years ago, more like 15 years ago, like with those Detroit teams with Babcock as coach. Every year, Johan Franzen, you wouldn't hear anything from in the regular season. Then all of a sudden the playoffs would start, and boom, Johan Franzen was scoring goals at will. And it's kind of the same thing here.
And it's true. It's very true. So now let's talk about maybe some not so surprises. Like what has been not very surprising that we've seen in this second round so far. I'll start with you, Tom.
Well, I'm gonna shamelessly plug these guys and go with that team on your jersey who I love so much, the New York Islanders. You know, business as usual in Long Island. I mean, in Long Island, even though they're not really there, they're in Toronto now. But business as usual with them. They are just executing that 2-1-2 forecheck, which I love, by the way, because that's what I was raised playing in travel hockey growing up. They're executing that forecheck. There's not one star on that team. There's not one go-to guy. They're rolling all four lines, and they're just winning. They're just winning games. They're not doing anything fancy. They're not doing anything. They're not doing anything. Like, oh, they got the speed. Oh, they're just executing their game plan perfectly. One thing I'll say though about the Islanders, they're up 3-1. You got to realize they're playing against a coach who, in 2 consecutive years in the past, was down 3-1 in 2 series in the past when Vigneault was coaching the Rangers. And he coached 2 teams from 3-1 deficits to 4-3 series wins. Will it happen here? Probably not. But it is something to keep in the back of your mind, especially if Philly wins Game 5. Then you start thinking, is Vigneault working his magic again? But just the way the Islanders are playing right now, I mean, it pains me to say it as a Ranger fan, but they're just getting everything done right. They're playing perfect hockey right now. They're playing unbelievably. People are comparing them sort of to the Devils in the 90s with that trap. My headphone just doesn't want to stay in my ear tonight. And I don't think they're doing that. I think they're a little more aggressive than those teams were, but it is similarly set up because there's not one guy on, and even the Devils have Brodeur and Steve, and they don't even have high caliber guys like that. They are just executing they're executing their team play perfectly right now. As a Ranger fan, pains me to say it, but I got to give credit where credit's due.
I definitely agree on that, and it doesn't surprise me that the Islanders have come into this series guns a-blazing. And if there's one team I would not necessarily count out down 3-1, it's the Philadelphia Flyers. But the difference maker for the Flyers, it needs to be their top 6 needs to do something. Their top 6 has been very, very quiet. And what's funny is about a year back, we were talking about a particular signing that the Philadelphia Flyers made when they signed Kevin Hayes to this astronomical amount of money, especially for a forward who is probably only going to play top 9 minutes. And yet he's been a difference maker in this particular series. He's been the guy that's been in a lot of these plays. He's been in the mix, getting points as well. So I don't want to necessarily count the Flyers out, but I need to see more from forwards like Jacob Voracek. I need to see more from Claude Giroux. I need to see more from Sean Couturier. These are guys that have put up massive amounts of points in the past, and the fact that they have gone dark is of great concern for the Philadelphia Flyers, and they need answers going into Game 5, or else they're going to be leaving their young goaltender Carter Hart high and dry. The one team that has not surprised me, and this is the team that I have been so high on since the playoffs have begun. I know I'm repping the Islanders today, but the Vegas Golden Knights, they have not surprised me whatsoever in the fact that they are up 3-1 against Vancouver. And Vancouver is a good team. The Canucks have a very skilled group of forwards, group of young forwards. They also have defensive capability, especially highlighting right now Quinn Hughes. But they have just run into a hot Vegas Golden Knights team who has not stopped since the beginning of this round robin, since the beginning of the playoffs. There's a reason why the Vegas Golden Knights came in as the number 1 seed when nobody thought that they were going to be leaving with the number 1 seed, except for me. But regardless, they have just been performing so well. It doesn't matter whether they've had Lehner in. It doesn't matter if they've had Marc-Andre Fleury in. They have performed so well, and it's been on the backs of leading goal scorers like Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, who had 2 goals last night, Riley Smith, who's also been a surprise on their second line, Jonathan Marchessault. This is a team that can score at will. What do you think, Tom? Has it been surprising to you?
I wouldn't say it's been surprising. They are kind of built similar, and they kind of do things similar to what the Islanders are doing now. All these guys you mentioned, Marchessault, Pacioretty, Stone. You look at these guys, and they're not stars. They're never going to win a Hart Trophy. They're never going to win an Art Ross or a Rocket Richard or anything. but Vegas too. They just play a good team game. Now, I have ranted and raved about what's going on in Vancouver. I love what they're doing up there. I think that if there's going to be a team that does bring that Stanley Cup back to Canada in the next few years, it's going to be the Vancouver Canucks. But I just think at this time, it's just a case of a young team who hasn't been there before playing against a team that has. Vegas was in the finals 2 years ago. Vegas, they blew that lead to San Jose last year, but they're a playoff tested team. All of a sudden, you mentioned Marc-Andre Fleury. All of a sudden, he knows how to play in the playoffs ever since he left Pittsburgh. I don't know what happened there. I don't know how he figured out how to do that, but because usually in the past in Pittsburgh, you'd have Fleury in net, and it'd be game 3 of the quarterfinals. You'd see the Philadelphia Flyers put 8 goals on him in the second period, But yeah, I really like it. It doesn't surprise me. I thought maybe Vancouver would have made it a better series. And I think last night with that game, I tried to stay up and watch it. Unfortunately, with the realities of having to be up at 5:45 for work every day, that's kind of not possible. But I watched the highlights this morning, and it was, like I said before, it was a young team going up, and their confidence brimming, but a veteran team who's been there before, and a veteran team that doesn't rely on stars to win them games, coming back and beating them. And that's exactly what Vegas did last night. I thought that maybe after game 3, Vancouver would make this a little more interesting. And for a while last night, it looked like they would. But I don't know. I mean, maybe Vancouver can get one more win here. But, yeah, Vegas really is firing on all cylinders now. And, I would right now, I think I would have them as the favorite to come out of the West. As good as Dallas has been, I think Dallas's run may end next round, unless Colorado pulls some crazy miracle out here. But right now, I really like what Vegas is doing. I hate the fact that there's a team in Las Vegas. We could do a whole show about that at another time about why I don't like that. I'll leave that alone for now. But if they weren't the Las Vegas Golden Knights, if this was just team black and gold, I do like the way they're playing. They're not relying on stars. They're playing a team game, and it's like I said, it's just a case of veterans versus kids right now, and they're executing perfectly.
Well, I guess we'll have to look forward to the He-Man Vegas Haters Club meeting at some point down the line. But that also kind of segues into our next point when we're talking about the second round of the playoffs. As it's winding down, we have to start looking forward towards the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, which are going on after the second round concludes. So that being said, Tom, who do you predict to see in the Eastern Conference Final? We'll start in the East and we'll move to the West.
All right. Like I said, since we haven't seen Game 5 yet in this Islanders-Philly series, right now I am picking the Islanders to move on. If Philly were to win Game 5 and with Vigneault as coach, like I said before, I'd be scratching my head a little bit and saying, hey, wait a minute. This story's been written before, and Vigneault being down 3-1 knows how to do it. But like I said, we haven't played Game 5 yet, so we don't know. So I am going to go with Tampa and the Islanders in the East. It's just right now, I think Tampa has Boston in that corner, and they're ready to just go in for the kill. And like I said, the Islanders are just playing so good against Philly. I think you're going to see that. I think out West, I hate to say it, I hate to be so predictable here, but it's just the way things are looking right now. I think it's going to be Vegas and Dallas out West. I do. I mean, maybe Colorado makes it interesting out there, and maybe Vancouver does too, pushes those series to 6. But right now, it's just hard to see either one of those teams coming back from 3-1. It's predictable, and I hate to be predictable. It's just the way things are looking right now. It's just hard not to be.
And it's true. I mean, with the Eastern Conference, what I'll say is my prediction for the Eastern Conference Final, it's similar to yours. I'm going to predict right now that it will be Tampa Bay winning their series against Boston, possibly even tonight after we speak, as well as the Islanders pulling it out over Philadelphia. I still think Philadelphia is not going to make it easy for them to move on. I still see that Philadelphia-New York matchup going to 6 or 7 games, but I think the Islanders have had their number the entire time. Anytime Philadelphia responds with being up by a goal, New York is very, very quick to respond afterwards. And it's more so a case of Philadelphia just getting cold at the absolute wrong time. So that's not necessarily a fault, and Philadelphia will certainly be back in the playoffs next year. I think they're going to be a team to really kind of contend with in the Eastern Conference for a couple of years to come. In the Western Conference, I am going to pick my Vegas Golden Knights right now that I've been rooting for this entire playoffs because I've just kind of jumped on their bandwagon for a little while now. I'm not counting Colorado out just yet. If there's any team that I think could come back, I think it could actually be Colorado. The reason why I say that is because Colorado has been able to score at will very, very easily. You have a lot of scoring potential on that Colorado team in Nathan McKinnon, in Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, Nazem Kadri, who's been absolutely awesome for the past, I feel like, 2 series now, and not everybody's really picked up on that. This is a Colorado team that could pull themselves back from 3-1, but the difference maker is going to be, can their defense hold up against this Dallas team, and can their goaltending hold up? And that's going to be the difference. And if there's any team that's going to pull it out from 3-1, I think it's Colorado. So I'm still going to go with my prediction from last round and say it's going to be Vegas and Colorado. But moving on now from the NHL playoffs, we did have one interesting trade that happened since the last time that we talked, Tom, and that was with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Pittsburgh Penguins. To paint a picture here, the main piece of that trade was Toronto Maple Leafs forward Kasperi Kapanen being traded alongside forwards Pontus Aberg and defenseman Jesper Lindgren, being traded from Toronto to Pittsburgh in exchange for Evan Rodriguez, David Warsofsky, Philip Hollander, and a 2020 first-round pick. So based on this trade, Tom, who do you feel like was the winner of this trade?
I'm going to say Toronto is right now. The thing is that Toronto, as you have seen, very, very top-heavy with the forwards. They need a defenseman badly. They're going to get that pick at number 15 in the first round. Around that, there's a kid named Caden Goulet. I'm probably butchering the hell out of his name right now, unfortunately. I don't know how to say it right. He's playing out in the WHL right now. He's projected to go around 15, and I think that's what Toronto wants. They want a hard-nosed defenseman. He's doing that. He's playing over in Prince Albert right now, 11 goals, 29 assists, 40 points in 64 games this year. The WHL is a tough-nosed defenseman factory for players that hard-nosed defensemen who can play both ends of the ice. That's where you want to go looking. The only thing is that my fear with Toronto is that defensemen aren't like forwards when you draft them. He may take another year to develop before you can throw him in there. It's not like you just throw a defenseman out there as a number one defenseman and just say, okay, here you go. Here he is, number one. It's a little bit different with defensemen. I think Toronto did win the trade because he'll be a big part of their future, and a lot of those guys are still fairly young. Matthews, Marner, Nylander, all still fairly young. And I mean, even Tavares is still fairly young if you think about it. Pittsburgh, Jimmy Rutherford, he's going for it. He knows that Crosby and Malkin aren't getting any younger. He wants to get one more cup, and I do think Pittsburgh is sort of filling a need. After they lost Phil Kessel, they haven't had that depth behind Crosby and Malkin. I know in 17, Kessel was playing with Malkin on the second line, but I know in 16 they had those 3 guys playing on 3 different lines, and it worked out very well for them. I think that's what he's doing. I think he's not eyeing up to the future yet because, I think that you maybe have 2 more years left of a prime Crosby and a prime Malkin, and I can understand where he's coming from on this one. But I think at the end of the day, if Pittsburgh doesn't win a cup here and this 15th overall pick, which could be Caden Goulet, we don't know yet. Stranger things have happened in the draft. But if he does come to Toronto, and he's the missing piece of that puzzle, and they're a contender for the next few years, and they do go on and win a cup, and Pittsburgh burns out terribly, and Crosby and Malkin retire, and the team is left with almost no prospects and no farm system, it's really going to come back and bite them. I get what Rutherford did, but there's no guarantee it's going to work either. I think that Pittsburgh, the last 2 years, the cracks are really starting to show in that foundation, and Crosby and Malkin are great guys. They're never going to trade Sidney Crosby. If I was Jimmy Rutherford after this year, I would have maybe started putting feelers out for Malkin, saying, what would you give me for him? I need to start rebuilding this thing. But I guess he thinks, and he's right to think this, that they still have 2 prime years left, and maybe he can squeeze one more Stanley Cup out. But at the end of the day, Toronto won this trade.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I really love this trade for Toronto because it not only gives them the flexibility in the draft, but I also think that if Toronto sees the writing on the wall and maybe they don't see the defender that, it could be Caden Goulet. If they don't see the defender that they like going to them and falling to them at number 15 in the NHL draft this upcoming October, there is the possibility that they could just take that 15 pick and maybe use it in another trade. Because for me, I feel like Toronto is 1 to 2 defensemen away from being a solid team in the playoffs that can at least give teams a run for their money, maybe even get them towards that Stanley Cup final. There's been talk that maybe Toronto could be calling up St. Louis and trying to get one of their spare defensemen, whether it's Vince Dunn or Colton Parayko. And for either of them, you have to trade probably that spare first round pick to get it. So there could be that turnaround for the Maple Leafs that they could literally just take it, flip it for something else. But on the flip side, for the Pittsburgh Penguins who are acquiring Kasperi Kapanen, I don't necessarily understand this from Pittsburgh's from their perspective. I think what they really needed to do, in my opinion, they needed to start retooling, not necessarily getting somebody who's still in that top 6 of like, okay, we can still get there. We can still get there. This is almost reminiscent to me of the New Jersey Devils when their playoff window shut and they were adamant. This was like the late Lou Lamoriello days, like when he was still GM. Of we can still be that top team. We still have Brodeur. Like, look, we still have Brodeur. We still have Ilya Kovalchuk. We still have Zach Parise. Then, sure enough, Zach Parise left. Ilya Kovalchuk left. It left the team completely gutted, but you still were trying to like patch the team here and there with these little signings or these, trades for, guys that they didn't necessarily need. But that's kind of reminiscent to me with Pittsburgh right now. I don't think they necessarily needed to go and get a Kasperi Kapanen. They need to be looking at dumping a little bit more of their payroll. Maybe they do that, with trading maybe a Matt Murray this offseason. Maybe they go and take feelers for Evgeny Malkin, which they should do. No Pittsburgh fan wants to hear this, but it's one or the other. You got to either part with Crosby or you got to part with Malkin. And
you're never going to part with Crosby.
Fans, yeah, exactly. Pittsburgh is never going to part with Crosby, and rightfully so. He should be a Penguin for life. And yes, Gino should be a Penguin for life too. And I get that, but you can't have your cake and eat it too in this situation. If Pittsburgh still wants to be a relevant team and really be serious about playoffs for the coming future, they need to part with one or the other. And obviously, as well as I do, which one they have to part with.
I agree with that too. It's just, if you look, you mentioned retool. When Ray Shero was initially fired, because remember in the Ray Shero days, they had won that cup in 2009, and he used to load those teams up every deadline. Jerome McKinley, guys like that. They sort of did that retool already after 2015. I remember after 2015, everybody thought the Penguins were dead. Everybody thought, this is it. Crosby's got his one cup. This team's going to fade into obscurity. Rutherford said, okay, I'm going to use Crosby and Malkin as my centerpieces. And I hate to give Pittsburgh credit for anything, because as a Ranger fan, I grew up hating them because I always thought they cheated a little bit, but that's another story for another day. But, what they did was they slotted these guys in with Crosby and Malkin, and I think Jimmy Rutherford still believes that he can still do that. You had the guys like Brian Russ, Patrick Hornqvist, Connor Sheary. I think he's thinking he could still bring these guys to the minor leagues and throw them up there with Crosby and Malkin and, for the next 2 years, try to get that other cup. The only problem is that, at that time, Crosby and Malkin were in their late 20s, early 30s. Now they're heading into their mid-30s. They're going to start slowing down. It's just a fact. I've only seen one player be in his prime his whole career, and it wasn't Gretzky, it wasn't Messier, it was Lidstrom up in Detroit. I think if Lidstrom put his skates on now, he could still dominate most players in this league. But, I think Rutherford's doing a last-ditch effort, and, maybe it works. I doubted Rutherford last time, and look what happened. They won 2 cups in a row. But I think at this point, this is a little bit moot right now,
And to me, if it works out, I'll eat my words. I'll gladly, say, you know what, I was wrong, you were right. The one thing that should be a concern to Pittsburgh fans is they really don't have that much in terms of prospects coming up, and this would have been a good draft to hold on to that first round pick, because this is a deep first round, one of the deepest first rounds that we've seen probably in the past decade. We haven't had a deep first round like this in a while, and holding on to that pick could have at least given them somebody that they could have, maybe stored away for maybe 2 to 3 years, like let them develop and really come up with the right opportunity. That's why I don't necessarily like this.
Exactly. They probably could have brought Connor Zary in to replace Malkin or something like that, I look at different sites every day. I'm just looking at Tankathon right now, and you have Zary ranked as number 15. Obviously, every site's going to be different. There's only one clear-cut number one, Alexi Lafreniere, and, well, we all know where he's going, but
yeah.
I want to hear it. Yeah. I really do think it was a bad move. They could have drafted a forward. They, like I said, they brought Kapanen to replace Kessel. Even if they didn't take Zary, you had guys like Seth Jarvis available around there, Dawson Mercer, guys who you could have, maybe not this year, but if you brought in next year, you could have used this some depth. You know what I'm saying? So I do think it was a big mistake on Rutherford's part to do this. But like I said, I thought Rutherford was making big mistakes 5 years ago, and the Penguins went and won 2 cups in a row. So that's why he gets paid to do his job, and I don't. I just sit here and talk about it every week.
That's true. I mean, we'll have to see what happens, but this is going to be a trade that'll be developing for a while. We might even see one of these pieces on either side get flipped. The one thing I'll, before leaving this topic is don't be surprised if Toronto makes 1 or 2 more moves before we get to the NHL draft in October.
Agree 100%.
Yeah, there's going to be more that's going to be coming on that end. And to wrap up and to kind of end our news cycle for today, I wanted to end with a feel-good story, because I wanted to end on something, really a really cool thing to see. Oscar Lindblom today, or rather yesterday, took pregame warm-ups with Philadelphia. For those of you that might not be aware, Oscar Lindblom was a top 6 forward for Philadelphia at the start of this season and unfortunately was diagnosed with leukemia early on this season. And it is a really awesome thing to see that he is back taking warm-ups and that it looks like, he's in full remission and he's ready to go. Tom, how do you feel about this?
I think it's a great thing. I know, and we've seen this before with Mario Lemieux. We saw it with Saku Koivu. We saw it with a few players. John Cullen, he's a little bit of a lesser known one, but I think it's great when these guys beat it and can come back and play. I think it's a great thing. I don't know if he'll maybe play the rest of these playoffs, but hopefully he'll be back at 100% next year and back to the player he was. It's a great thing when these guys beat this and can get back out there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, for you and I, you being a Rangers fan, myself being a Devils fan, so both of us, we agree that we both don't necessarily like the Philadelphia Flyers. But, anytime we're talking about, a situation like this, health comes before any kind of fandom whatsoever. And I'm definitely happy to see that Oscar Lindblom was able to overcome leukemia so quickly. And I sincerely hope that he's able to return to the ice at full strength and be able to do this for a long time to come for him, especially since he's such a young player. And we've seen the other side of the coin, and we certainly, especially on our parts, we don't want to necessarily see that for Oscar Lindblom. So we're really, really happy that he is doing so well and actually took warm-ups yesterday. Who knows? Maybe it even fuels Philadelphia to try to get to the conference final. So that way maybe he could join them for the conference final, which would be another amazing step for Oscar Lindblom. And it would be great. But that is going to wrap us up for today. Please make sure you follow us at I80 Sports, I80sports.com. At I80sports_sports NHL on Twitter and on Facebook at I80 Sports Discussion Group. And also make sure you catch us every Monday night for your NHL content. Again, this was Brian. This was Tom. Thank you guys for watching.
Have a good night.